question is, was there a particular moment in your childhood that made you want to do what you do now?
Damn, who asked that? That's a good question.
I'll tell you after you've answered it. It doesn't make much difference, does it? But I like to keep it.
Was there a defining moment? Yeah. I've told this story before, but I hurt my knee pretty bad when I was a preteen. Like I was maybe a couple years from being a teenager. I was 13, I think, 12 or 13. I loved basketball. Like I adored playing basketball when I was a kid, and I hurt my left knee. I think it was something called the MCL or PCL. It's been so long now. But it's one of those ligaments, not the ACL. It wasn't one of those. I didn't need surgery, but I needed basically a good 6 months of rehab. And I was immobile. And like the thing I loved most was being active. I loved being outside. I loved playing sports. So all of that went out the window. And as a 12, 13-year-old, you can only play so many video games, before your parents start to think, get off your ass and do something. So I took up guitar as a hobby, and I didn't love it at first. The thing that made me love it, and the thing that sort of gave me this inkling in my head was maybe I can do this, was watching this MTV special with the Foo Fighters. If you're familiar with their first record in the mid 90s, I think it came out in 94, 95, maybe earlier. It had the gun on it. It had like an old timey looking gun. It was their very first record where Dave Grohl played literally every instrument on the record. And they recorded it he recorded it while he was working on Nirvana at the same time. So I really liked the songs that I heard from it when I was that age. And then I saw an MTV special where he played that entire record with his band at the time. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. Like I fell in love with the way it sounded, the way he looked, like the charisma, the power that he had. It just looked like the most fun thing in the world. And I was like, wow, I want to learn how to play all these songs. And then I started to find myself sort of having these pipe dreams. It's like, maybe I can try doing this, not realizing that the odds were so stupid small that I could actually do it, like realistically in my life. It was just, I want to be cool like this guy and maybe find people I could jam with. And that's when I started to sort of daydream about it a little bit more. But yeah, I do think that everybody who, starts out as a kid has these sort of icons they look up to. It's just like, oh, that person is who I'm going to idealize. And my first one was Dave Grohl.
Yeah, he's such a hero. There's something I almost kind of worry about, even for my generation, but certainly like the one that to follow, is that like it's so, I don't know if this has always been a thing. Maybe it's just easy to think that it's a new thing at my age, but I feel like it's more and more difficult to be different without sort of critique, or especially with the online world nowadays, and someone like Dave Grohl, like he's so charismatic and so Ed from Bury Tomorrow is the guy that asked your question. We were talking about Jack Black, and these guys are such unique characters, and I worry that people like them are almost getting extinguished by the nature of this sort of online platform or platforms that we have. Like these kind of frontmen, these like what's the word, like not abnormal but super I can't think of the good word to
I know what you're saying. Like somebody who could be famous in any era, right? Like Jack Black is so good at being full of life, full of charisma. He could have been famous in the 1800s because of who he is, and I think it's cool that like there are still those frontmen out there who I feel like transcend whatever genre they're in. Like, someone like Ollie from Bring Me the Horizon or someone like that, like you look at that guy, you're like, okay, that guy's a superstar, any big band has that. I've never thought about whether like the current climate of social media and like the way music is consumed now, like encourages those people to shine or discourages. I guess the positive is that everybody has a platform to do so, but it's easier to get washed out because of how just the sheer amount of personality we're able to sort of push out there, like the most boring person. Sorry, I'm going to sound like a dick right now, but like the most boring vanilla cardboard person in the world can sound like a comedian with a couple thumbs, you know what I mean? Like on Twitter. And I don't know, that seems to me that could dilute that whole process. But I think at the end of the day, that true sort of rock star charisma that I recognized in Dave Grohl in the mid '90s, and that, you could point to any, like a Jack Black, I feel like is an extreme example, just like that guy's a genius. But I feel like that style of being a superstar, a frontman, like an icon, will never really go out of style, because it's just timeless,
Yeah, I think people always want someone to be inspired by, even if they're not trying to be that person or their own version of that person. I think, like, as well, with the nature of, you're talking about people's ability. Oh, just heard something crash in my apartment. Well, if I disappear in the next 2 minutes, someone call someone.
I will.
I've got a window open in there. What was I saying? The nature of like how stuff is circulating so quickly. This kind of actually brings me on to something I sort of wrote down, but I feel like it's so difficult to be original because everyone's almost bouncing off of each other. All these ideas, you have a cool riff, you put it online, or if you're an artist, you'll put your picture, if you're any form of creative, there is this, you're almost forced to become successful, you're almost forced to put all this stuff out. And then you put all this stuff out, other people are inspired by that, which is great. But then I feel like you end up with this big echo chamber, whether it's music or whatever, where people are inspired by a thing they saw a week ago. Whereas I don't know if that could really happen, in the 80s, because you couldn't put a record out in a week, or
Right.
you couldn't just put up that riff you wrote. So I feel like we're getting this thing where you hear a lot of bands sounding a bit samey. I'm sounding like a bit of a dick now. I'm definitely guilty of this too when I'm sort of playing, but I feel like you're getting a lot of bands sounding quite samey because they're just influenced by the thing they heard last week. And it's like, and the collection of things they've heard over the last few months, which normally wouldn't be available to them, which I suppose there's obvious pros and cons, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, like a band like yours, I mean, I've heard so many bands that I can hear your kind of influence in. And what would you say to someone who maybe has listened to your music and wants to sound a bit like what you guys do, but how would you encourage them to take that inspiration but make it their own?
I think what I would say is very cliche, and something maybe you've heard before from other people in different walks of life, is just embrace being yourself. And that's very, I say it's cliche because everybody says it, and it's challenging to hear depending on what situation you're in. Like if you're a young person trying to establish their sound, trying to find their voice, I truly do feel like when you're starting out in your first months and years, or however many records, you put out in the beginning of your career, your voice is still you basically trying to emulate your heroes, the people you find near and dear to you. I mean, Periphery's never been shy about saying that, our main influence starting out are bands like, Meshuggah and Dream Theater and Metallica and whatever. You can hear it in our sound, especially in our early material. I feel like the idea of embracing yourself is something that you hear and you're like, okay, well, I don't really know what that means, but I feel like you have to get through a phase in the beginning where you are trying to emulate those that you look up to, and when I hear bands that are obviously trying to do like their take on a Periphery sound, I don't get mad or territorial or anything like that. I don't think I ever have. I think maybe at the very worst, 11 or 12 years ago, when we had just put out our first couple records, like I would be maybe a little annoyed by it. But at the end of the day, it's just like they're doing the same thing that I did and that the rest of our band did when we would upload demos to the internet and people would be like, oh, that just sounds like Meshuggah. That sounds like Deftones. It's like, well, yeah, that's who we are. And we were raised on that material. So we all have to go through a phase like that. I do believe. And, what you were saying before about originality and how hard it is to shine these. I've lamented over that exact thing before. And I honestly, like, I get to a point where, I am starved for original sounding music sometimes, and it all just kind of sound like an echo chamber, depending on what circles you're in. Obviously, like, I think social media algorithms play a part in this, right? Like if you're trying to discover new music through your social media algorithms, you're going to hear the same stuff thrown to you over and over and over and over again, because all those platforms do is just feed you that, across all other types of media. It's like, just, it'll give you the same political beliefs. It'll give you the same, friend circles. It'll give you the same everything, just sort of thrust towards you. And then that skepticism will be turned on its head when I discover a band like Zeal and Ardor. Have you heard of Zeal and Ardor?
Yeah, they're wicked. Yeah.
Yeah, they're a Swiss band, and they took everything that I thought about the current music climate, and they're like, oh shit, this band is doing something completely new. And that proves to me in that moment, it's like, oh, it's still very possible to cultivate a completely new sound and have influences that nobody else around them would have, and just spit out something completely original. So there are bands every once in a while that kind of take my sort of like old guy curmudgeon-y, skeptic, and turn it on its head, and are just like, well, this is something new. And I'm really happy when that happens.
Yeah. It's I think it's the whole inspiration thing. I think I sort of feel like it kind of goes in waves, in that the more people start to sound the same, the more the outliers start to sound like the outliers, and I think it's right. It's like it's very much glass half empty, glass half full scenario, because you can go, yeah, oh, well, everyone sounds the same, but you say, oh, I suppose that's my chance to maybe, whereas if everyone was sounding different, you'd be like, oh shit, everyone's like, it'd be great because there'd be loads of great music and there'd be loads of things to be inspired by, but that'd be pretty daunting if everyone just had this kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
What go on.
I was going to add real quick that I try to catch myself when I say things like, oh God, this just all sounds the same, because who probably said that is people back in the day when, Metallica and Megadeth were both at the peaks of their careers. I bet you that people at that time were saying the same thing about that whole scene, this like big four thrash movement that everybody reveres now in retrospect. But at the time, it had its detractors, most likely for the same exact reasons. And bands before that, the Beatles had people ripping them off, and the Beatles would admit to ripping off, their influences. So I think it's like this generational thing that's always been there, this ever-present presence of detractors, people criticizing something for not being original. I think that's as old as art itself,
With regards to your own sort of music, like it's obviously, particularly when you compare it to non-metal, more sort of pop culture kind of genres, it's obviously got its sort of complexity to it. When it comes to like expressing something, like whatever sort of emotion, whatever feeling it is you're trying to get out there, whether it be guitar or any sort of part of the song, like what do you think it is about more complex stuff that helps you personally to kind of deliver some sort of emotional thing through that? Because, someone could argue, you can deliver an emotional message or whatever it is you're trying to communicate with four chords, What is it that kind of draws you to, and maybe I've got it wrong, maybe you're not trying to communicate any kind of emotional thing, it's some people do everything differently, right? But what is it you feel that the more technical leaning stuff kind of helps you to communicate?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the technical side of it is just a reflection of the musical diet I had when I was a kid. That was how I was raised. I just thought that music was really cool growing up. I find it less cool now as a 40-year-old. God, it's weird to say I'm a 40-year-old. Yeah. Whenever I hear the overplaying now, like bands that I think to myself, oh, wow, that's a lot of notes, I think it's less impressive. But when I was, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that was what drew me into music was this, this technical proficiency that I thought was just the coolest thing ever. And, now I think my values have changed a little bit when it comes to music, and it kind of lies more in what you were referring to, conveying emotion, and more importantly, taking music from the emotions that I'm feeling, or, from us collectively as a band, and turning it into something, and then, you know, hopefully that being something that people can take that same emotion from, or take their own version of it. But yeah, it's kind of the anchor of the music being this sort of sincere emotional thing. Like that to me is the sort of pinnacle of being creative. I don't ever think about the technical side of it anymore, nor does any of the band. And I don't think even back in our early days, like Periphery 1, Periphery 2, and none of us ever really consciously leaned into the idea of being a technical band. You know, like I've had people come up to me before and say like, oh, why isn't Periphery 5 as riffy or technical as Periphery 4 or 3 or 2 or whatever? And I never have an answer. I never know what to say, because I'm just, I don't know. Is it really? Like I never noticed, because I genuinely don't know whether, you know, song A is more riffy or technical or complex than song B. Again, I just think that is a happenstance kind of thing. It's a complete coincidence based off of who I am and how I was sort of brought up musically. And I know the other guys in the band, at least the creative core in our band, Jake and Misha, the other guitarists, the music they came up on was pretty similar to mine, which is music with a lot of notes, a lot of sort of shreddiness, a lot of technicality, stuff that like I hear now and it makes me giddy, it makes me very happy. You know, it's like this like hit of adrenaline when you hear something really complex and technical. And I still get it from time to time when I hear bands like, you know, Animals as Leaders, or like Meshuggah, or, you know, I saw Dream Theater live a couple weeks ago. And that was another moment where it's just like the sheer technicality of it all gives you that sort of like riding a motorcycle thrill, you know? But I wouldn't say in any way that that's ever been the anchor for our music. I would always point to it being a byproduct of who we were growing up, you know?
It's funny, I can, a bit of a sidetrack, but this might be a sort of interesting segue, but I did a guitar sort of degree. It wasn't really, well, it was a degree, I guess, but my final year piece we had to do like a technical guitar piece, and I chose to do Marigold because I was like, this is technically quite tricky. So, and hey, I think I got a good mark actually from memory. So there you go. I suppose I owe you a thank you or not for it being difficult. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why that made me think of that. But anyway, I thought that'd be a cool, I don't know.
See, that song is hard, right? Yeah. Like that song is tough to play. And I always take that for granted, like how challenging some of it is to play when I haven't played it in a long time and I go to relearn it. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, why do we do this to ourselves? And that's when I have the realization. It's like, oh yeah, I guess we're a technical band, you know, like, but I never think of it that way. I always think of the other side of it, like, you know, the whole intent behind it. What do we want to say? What are we feeling emotionally? And then I have rude awakenings like that. So sorry you had to learn that song.
I even tried to do the little arpeggio bit at the end. Yeah, because it's funny because I remember specifically that it was like you couldn't do, I don't think you could play a song that was like a vocal piece, but I think you guys had some sort of, or still have some sort of backing like version, like a non-vocal version on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So I think I must have played along to that or something. And because it's technical enough, I think the people examining were like, oh, cool. Like I think I basically got away with that basically, which is kind of cool. But with so many of you, obviously, I suppose so many of you, I suppose it's not necessarily that, how it says, well, it's 5 of you in the band, isn't there? And that's, I suppose, not
5. There's only 5. Yeah.
With particularly, I suppose 5. Yeah. I suppose if you include, in terms of his kind of stance in the band, I suppose if with everyone included, how do you kind of like communicate ideas clearly in a way that kind of represents everyone? Because I feel like, you know, you're all obviously your own people and you're going to have your own kind of ideas. And I don't just mean like, how do you get on? But like when it comes to what does this song mean? And I don't just mean in a lyrical sense, but in like a thematic sense, like what's this trying to do? How do you guys kind of maintain a relationship where you can communicate clearly and get these songs to a point where everyone feels like they're represented in some way?
I feel like we get to this point. Well, first of all, it's taken us years to get to this point, but it's this nature of deferring to one another. You know, like never needing or wanting to be the alpha in the room, because if you have that kind of just squashes what you're trying to describe. And I do agree we have that dynamic in this band. It's a very healthy, again, just deference, constantly deferring to one another, constantly sort of putting trust in one another. And if one person disagrees with another person, the first inclination is to take a step back and listen, as opposed to arguing why you're correct or why your view is right and the other person isn't. And that takes a while to learn how to do if that's not your background, you know, and us all being some form of like, you know, the opinionated asshole producer, which we all can be, you know, when we get very attached to certain ideas and concepts and thoughts in this band. And certainly song ideas, you know, and riff ideas, and every little tiny bit of nuance attached to our music, we all obsess over, every single one of us in our own way. So it's been a challenge. And I think we hit our toughest moments navigating this kind of stuff, you know, 9-10 years ago. But at this point now, I mean, we have it pretty smooth, because we've all just kind of learned how to communicate this kind of stuff with one another and learn how to place trust in the guy next to you when there's, you know, discord or people not really agreeing on certain things in the band, and learning that things are okay on the other side, right? Like if I get outvoted on a riff or a section or some kind of thing going on in the music, and I lose, and I take that disappointment and I just kind of set it to the side and I'm like, all right, let's move on. 6 months later, 8 months later, when the record comes out, I listen back to it. I'm like, yeah, these guys are right. Like this part's awesome. Like I dig this. There's something to be said for the kind of reward you get from that, you know, and that changes how you navigate moments like that occur in the future. You're not going to be so staunchly attached to your own ideas when you remember, you know, so many instances in the past where you place that trust in others and everybody ended up happier and everything ended up okay. And you know, nobody got screwed over in the end. So again, I feel like I'm describing parameters that you could apply to any relationship, really, you know, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, parents, anybody in your family, any kind of disagreements. Like this is a habit that when done consistently over time, strengthens every bond, every relationship, hell, even the workplace, you know, no matter what you do for a living.
I feel like that whole, certainly the last few years, I feel like my, sort of the experience of balancing, like killing off your ego while maintaining confidence and sort of a sense of identity. I feel like there is a balance there because you know, I feel like if you kill off too much of your ego, you start to lose a bit of whatever it is that is about you, whether it's a personal thing or a musical thing. How do you kind of, you know, I don't say kill off the ego, but like sort of quieten it while still maintaining that identity and that kind of thing that makes you in a musical sort of sense?
I know what you're saying. It's a tough battle, specifically when, at least in my case, I came into this with the greatest case of imposter syndrome. Like it still sucks. It's like, even at this point, having done this for so many years, and having checked off so many bucket list items, you know, things that like, if I would have done maybe a tenth of, I would have been happy just kicking the bucket and saying, I did that, you know? Here I am all these years later, still with that case of imposter syndrome. I don't think I'll ever shake it. And I've been told before, you know, like maybe you need to have more of an ego, but that always puts me in a tough spot because I'm like, wait, but all this, you know, mental health advice that's thrown my way, you know, and in therapy and stuff like that, I've been told, you know, check your ego because it's going to help you in every walk of life. But I'm like, yeah, but I'm also a performer, you know, and I'm in show business, technically speaking, you know, I have to be a showman. There's this whole other sort of public facing side that, I have to be aware of at all times. And, it's still something that I have to learn how to navigate. And when I see people being able to sort of, flip a switch, like one of my friends is Devin Townsend, who is, he's one of my musical heroes. but I saw him play a couple weeks ago, and he's just this madman with a microphone in front of him. He's a comedian, he's a showman, he's everything. He's everything you could possibly want in an entertainer on stage. He's making everybody laugh, he's shredding, he's singing his balls off up there. And you talk to him, and he's just like the most, like, there's zero ego. He constantly listens, and he's just, there's just nothing about who he is on a personal level that would make you say to yourself, oh, this guy just, ranted up there for 45 minutes and entertained thousands of people. And I have this just profound respect for people who can go from one to the other. It's a little bit trickier for me. And I feel like when I project ego, like when I'm up on stage performing with the band, that's the side that I have to kind of synthesize. That's the side that I have to work to get into and to have the confidence to get up there and play songs. Like, I don't do that naturally. I still get so many butterflies about performing. I have to get in this very specific headspace to get up there and do it proficiently. And it is work. It is definitely work to find this sort of middle ground. But again, I'm still trying to find answers for it, man. Like the imposter syndrome is real.
I feel like there's stuff where I don't know how you kind of shake it. Like I know for sure I'm kind of trying to force myself into the position. I really want to try the frontman thing, and I find the idea of it, I don't find it terrifying, the thought of it, like, now, but the idea of singing and putting yourself forward, there's something so personal about doing that. And, you're putting sort of everything into it. Like you said, you're performing, and you're, so the idea of having that sort of rejected by an audience or even just by people is quite scary. And I was trying to think, like, why am I afraid of that? Like, why? Yeah, it's no logical reason to be afraid of that. And, when I go back, I'm like, is it, does it go all the way back to childhood? Is it because, like, it's not like I was sort of horrendously bullied, but you know what schools are like you show any sign of anything and people are like, start pointing the finger. And do in terms of like this sort of imposter syndrome thing, I've chatted to a few people about this. Is there anything that without, we can get as personal as you like, but is there anything that you can point to where you think that, have you had any sort of process of self-discovery going, I think this is why I kind of feel this way, or is it still something you feel like you're always just figuring out?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I moved around every year because my dad was military, and then my mom and dad split up. My mom got remarried to a guy in the Navy. So my dad was Air Force, my stepdad was Navy. So she got into another marriage where we would just move constantly again. And I would never be able to hold on to friends. Like, I'd make friends and then I would move, make friends and then move, make friends and then move. And that gives you this complex as a kid, that nothing is permanent, that what's the point of investing in relationships when they're just going to be ripped away from you? And it made it very difficult for me to sort of have confidence socially back in those days. And I think I eventually got way better at it, at sort of learning how to be, I guess, a functioning teenager, like a socially functioning teenager. But I definitely carried around this thought that I didn't belong, like geographically belong in a place, and I never felt like I fit in, not in a personality standpoint, not in like a, well, they don't get me kind of way, but like literally like belong there, and I think that was pervasive in that it spread to my attitude towards circles, that whatever circle I was in a given place. And, the first time I ever felt like I belonged anywhere was when I discovered music, ironically enough. And that's the thing that sort of helped me, expedite, growth out of that awkward phase of being a kid. But yeah, I mean, moving around every couple months or every year was very challenging. It comes with its own share of like, and like Jake and Misha, my two other guitar players in Periphery, we talk about this all the time, but all three of us were bullied pretty heavily as kids for one reason or another. Misha moved around a lot. Jake, I don't think he moved around so much, but he liked the same thing that me and Misha liked when we were kids. It's like we all like dorky stuff. We were all pretty quiet kids. We were all pretty gentle and unassuming, which are good qualities to have as an adult. But as a kid, for some reason, kids hate that. Kids want you to be, loud and boisterous and obnoxious. And if you're anything, like one iota different than anybody else, you end up just getting the brunt of whatever insecurities they have, and in the form of bullying and belittling, whatever. But anyways, had my own steady diet of that as a kid. And I think that had to have contributed why I carried it around for so many years. But yeah, I don't know why I've held on to it for so long, but I know where the origins are. I think at least that's what I've, discovered in my own life.
I feel like that there's, the other, because that sounds, as you were saying that, it totally aligns up, right? Like from an outside in perspective. I certainly know when I try and think about these things in my own life, you never feel like you've got the answer. Like when you're trying to remember something and you never quite feel like you've remembered what the thing is. I always feel like that when I'm trying to answer these questions about myself, because I'm like, and this part of me just thinks, is it worth just like going, well, this is how I am now. This is what I'm like, and I should just work on that, rather than trying to spend all this time figuring it out, just going, this is how I am, so I should try and, not just accepting it and like in a defeatist sense. Rather than spending all this time trying to figure out, in some sort of meditative state, but rather be quite pragmatic and go, okay, I feel X, Y, and Z way about these things. Here's what I should do to work on it. Like, do you think there's some benefit to actually going, fuck all of that, I just want to just move on and just,
No, 100%. I think there's an enormous benefit in figuring out this stuff. And it's why like if anybody ever comes to me and they're like, hey man, I'm thinking about therapy, I'm always like, fuck yeah, do that. Because I think, so people always, it's cliche to what's the old way to make fun of therapy is just like, oh, it's your parents fucked you up. Surprise, like that's what all therapy is just figuring out that your family fucked you up. But no, I always do think it's valuable for people to explore their origins, because that does inform who you are now, 100%, and it informs how you can go about viewing the world if you understand more about where you came from, and more about why you are the way you are. Even if you're not 100% dead on, I think it's the most inexact science out there, right? Like our lives are not, it's not like computer code, but I feel like the more effort you make, the more benefit you are served in the current, because you're not just coasting. And I feel like that's a pitfall for sure, in this day and age, especially if you're for the most part, a happy adult. Like I'm sure you talk to 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 people and ask if they're happy, and they'll say yeah. I don't know how honest that is, but when you can just say to yourself, I'm happy, it's super easy to coast through life and never question, am I doing the right thing? Am I the person that I want to be? Why am I the way that I am? Why do I talk over people in conversation? Why do I cut people off in conversation? Why am I so insecure about whatever your thing is, whatever you can pinpoint about yourself, that you're not completely thrilled with. I don't believe there's ever a disadvantage to doing work and figuring out why you are the way you are, whether you go to a therapist, and I did this a couple of years ago with my dad, and it was so fucking helpful to me when I did this. It was like one of the things I'm most proud of, like the ideas that I had. But when you're a kid and there's so many things you don't remember, or you remember it in a certain way, but as an adult, you think to yourself, you're like, there's no way it was like the way I remember, because I was so young. I was an idiot 9-year-old. Like, what do I remember about the situation?
I think I've got dumber since then, but carry on.
So have I. So this was 3 years ago or so. I sat my dad down. He and I sat together at a cafe, and I interviewed him. And we went through the years, and he looked a little like labored. He was just like, oh, Jesus Christ, we got to talk about, this divorce with your mom that I went through decades ago. But he helped me as much as he could. He was like, this is what the summer of 1984 was like, and this is where I was, and this is what my life is like. And it was really, really heavy and really emotional because, you know, my dad is my hero. And I remember my dad being like this invincible figure in my life growing up. And that's why he was my hero, because he was kind and he was humble, he was modest, but he was also strong and invincible. You know, yeah. And I learned through those conversations with him that he wasn't, that he was going through some really crazy shit that I would have never been able to wrap my brain around as a kid. And it really made me appreciate his journey more. God, I feel like that's underselling it, you know, the way I'm describing it now. It was a moving experience to sit there and like write down what my dad, and I would dictate it, you know, I would write it down into pages and pages of you know, notebook paper. And this was like a 2-hour conversation I had with my dad, just a timeline about what he was doing, how he was feeling, what he was going through. And it was such an awakening. And I like how it changed me now, how it made me who I am now in 2023. I don't know if I can tell you, but I can tell you that it was enriching and it was moving, and it gave me a new appreciation for one other thing in my life that was already important to me, but now I can appreciate on a whole nother level. So, you know, if anybody's listening out there, like, you know, I don't know how close you are to either of your parents, but you'd be surprised if you would just get a little bit deeper than the surface as far as how you know your parents, how it can change you, you know, and how it can make you appreciate who they are, not as parents, but as human beings.
Yeah, I certainly think the understanding yourself thing, I think you can in my head, I can almost prove to myself why it's important. For the record, I was sort of playing devil's advocate a bit in terms of not, you know, when we're talking about not sort of understanding or just pushing forward. But although I do think there is in some ways benefits to just like cracking on. But I found so for example, I feel like when I was younger, I could watch a sad part in a movie. And you know, when you're young, you obviously you picture when you're a younger person, or you think of a younger person, yeah, like a kid. You picture someone that's a lot more emotionally volatile, a lot more kind of vulnerable than that. But I would never be like particularly upset or affected by like the sadder part in a movie, for example, when someone dies or when something horrible happens. Whereas now, like if there's a sad moment in a movie, I feel myself like I feel it, you know, and I think it's because I can relate to in some way what is happening through my experience or whatever, and through kind of understanding, having some understanding of myself to then project that onto whatever I'm watching. Like whenever I watch that, I mean, I've not got kids, but whenever I watch that moment in Interstellar, I don't know if have you seen the movie?
Oh, that's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, and right at the end, I've talked about this a bit before, but actually on the podcast, but like right at the end when he's there with his elderly daughter who has now surpassed him in age, basically, and that whole like that to me, I haven't even like I'm not even thinking about having kids yet, but like the idea of that and the way it all just is put together, you know, I can't think of anything more. And I remember I was talking to a friend and I was saying like, I can't think of anything worse. Like as a father, if you were to just wake up one morning and your kids live their whole life without you and then they just die and you're still there, you know, and I had one friend who just didn't get it. And they were just like, maybe they didn't get the movie, maybe the movie didn't work for them or something. I don't know. But like, and I feel like it comes with some level of understanding of, I'm not trying to sound all pretentious, like, oh, you must understand yourself to find that, you know, to understand. Yeah, like Rick and Morty fans tell you how smart they are kind of thing. Well, I do like Rick and Morty though. And I feel like I feel like I empathize better now with things like with movies and with music as well. There are moments in music where I feel like that ties to something that in theory, I should be more emotionally stable and with it now than when I was 10. But I still now, when I watch a sad moment in a movie, I'm like, oh fuck, that's felt that, you know.
It's like, you know what it's like? It's like the kid who grows up, the kid who like loves the most dangerous roller coasters, you know, and then they come of age and they, you know, they're a 20-year-old or 25-year-old. They can't stand roller coasters, you know, because they can wrap their head around the stakes. They understand enough about the world to know that like, oh, well, this is really dangerous. And if something slight goes wrong, I could die and be exploded into a bunch of pieces when I hit the pavement. I feel like it's like a distant cousin of the effect that you're talking about. But how weird would it be though if it was the opposite? Wouldn't that be weird if you were like I think it's very healthy. What you're describing is very healthy and very normal to be like that, you know, because it would be ass backwards if it were a case of you being like really emotional as a kid and then you all of a sudden getting older and watching, you know, a really moving scene or maybe something dramatic happen in your life and you're just stoic about it, you know, like that's the opposite of being a vulnerable human being, which I believe is the healthiest possible thing for a person. It's just opening yourself, being vulnerable to whatever comes your way, whether it's something in your life or a movie that makes you cry.
Do you feel like in terms of this actually it kind of goes off of we're going on a whole sorry Periphery fans, we're going on a whole other thing.
Yeah, dude, I mean, yeah, for Periphery fans, there's a million places you can go hear me talk about, you know,
Yeah,
7-string guitars and scale lengths, whatever. We're talking about crying right now. Let's do it.
Yeah. No, yeah, what was I going to say? Yeah, the thing one of the things I've been trying to come to terms with the most, and it definitely ties in with what we're talking about, is like the trying to understand. It's so hard. I find it the more I try and the thing I'm trying to balance in my life, and I still don't know where the answer is. And I honestly don't know if I'm going to find the answer to this. I don't think there is one really, but it's the balance between if someone wrongs you in some way, intentionally or not, whenever you're angry at them, there's this inner feeling of like, I wouldn't have done that. Or like, yeah, you're angry at them because they've done something to you that isn't fair for whatever reason. Fair might be an understatement. Like they might have really fucked you up for whatever reason. And I don't really know how to, because it's always, you know, walk a mile in their shoes kind of thing. And if you were them, you would have done the same thing. All of these sort of cliche things. I always find it hard to come to terms with how you find that balance between, you know, like trying to understand other people when they do something, like trying not to be angry at someone when they do something wrong, but like how much right do you have? Can you be angry at someone? Because when you think about all the things that went in there to their life up to that very point, you know, I'm not giving a specific example particularly, but I'm sure you've got examples in your life where you feel like someone's done something that has sort of annoyed you or worse. And then to have sympathy for them and go, you know, it feels very sort of turn the other cheek. And I don't know whether you should do that in every situation in life. I haven't really figured that out, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've read so much literature about this kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, the prevailing thought, at least what I've read, is that you should try and be a version of that as many times as you can. 10 times out of 10, be the person who doesn't get upset or get angry, or, you know, I shouldn't simplify it like that. Basically control, and this is a healthy thing. This is what I try to do, is tend to my side of the street, you know, is only try and focus on the things that are on my side of the street, things that I control. Try not to, you know, be hyper obsessed with things out of my control. When people cut me off in traffic for shitty weather, for, you know, the car breaking down, things that I don't necessarily have control over. I think it's healthy to aspire to be that way, but God, it feels so unrealistic. And I say this as somebody who believes that it's the right thing to do, because I try every day to not hold things against people and to not, you know, not be the person who resents things that I have zero control over. And I find that I'm happier and healthier when I aspire to be that every day. But along with that comes this lenience you have to give yourself, where if you don't live up to being that person, you can't punish yourself, you know, and you can't just be like, oh gosh, I'm a Neanderthal, or like I'm an idiot for not being able to be this person who I want to be, even if it's just this insanely unrealistic way to be. So I think there's nothing wrong with aspiring to be a certain way, you know, and not living up to it. I think the journey and the effort is where the lion's share of the value is, you know, and just trying to be this impossible to rattle, sort of unshakable, stoic person when it comes to being, you know, angered or upset by people, things, events, things that you can't control. You know, you can't be this constant Zen bubble that nothing ever penetrates. Like, you got to go live in the mountains. You got to, you know, the old Teddy Roosevelt thing about being the man in the arena, you know, like, don't be the spectator, be the man in the arena. Be the one competing. Don't be the one in the back row of the Coliseum watching and critiquing. Be the person fighting and risking your blood. I think about that every day. Instead of disappearing and being the hermit and being the one who hides, be the person participating. You can't be perfect if you're the man in the arena every single day. You are going to risk yourself, and you're not going to be perfect. You're going to lose sometimes. And along with that comes this forgiveness that you have to give yourself, you know, this leniency that you have to have all the time.
Yeah. There's definitely that kind of stoic thing. That's another one where I'm not sure where I'm at with it. You know, I certainly think there's some benefit to some sort of like mental resilience, you know, and I find sometimes I found myself in situations where, you know, we're always encouraged to talk about whatever's upsetting us, but sometimes I feel like there's a point where I sometimes even feel myself where I'm talking to people and I'm just like, I don't think I'm helping myself here. I think there's something I've got to figure out within me, you know, but then I don't know where the balance is between that and then like sort of, I don't know, confiding in others and that. I think I always feel kind of proud of myself if I've sort of figured something out in myself, you know. Yeah. But then I feel like I don't really know where that comes from particularly. But well, in terms of like, there'll be a lot of people probably who, you know, you say it yourself where you've achieved some things that you would have been happy with even a degree to have achieved a degree of some of the stuff you're doing. So there are probably people that would hear some of the stuff you're saying about sort of, you know, I know it's I certainly appreciate hearing someone like yourself saying that you're figuring these things out. But what would be maybe your, like, how do you think how you view things now have changed through your experience of achieving some of the things that you maybe have dreamed of? Because I think a lot of people see them as like an end point, you know, like, oh, I've played that festival, or I've signed a record deal, or whatever, you know, or apply that to your various career paths, whatever. Like, having achieved some of those things, and obviously the goalposts keep moving, don't they? But having achieved some of them, do you feel like your view on any of these sort of topics has shifted at all? Like, I suppose having gone over the clouds and see what's what. Mm-hmm. Is it in some way what it lives up to be, sort of achieving these things you want to do, or is it like not at all, or somewhere in the middle? I'm guessing.
I think there's two parts to the answer. One is that it does achieve to some degree, especially if you obsess over these things. Like, if you've dreamed of playing, you know, Wembley Stadium your whole life, you know, and it's a bucket list thing, you never think you will do it, and then you do it, it's going to feel insane. But I think what I've learned is that the space that it occupies in terms of satisfaction and just overall sustainable happiness at the end of the day, like the space that it takes up, it's not that big. And it's kind of like fast food, like, you know, it's kind of just, it's there, and there's a euphoria and a high, and it's gone. And there's pictures of it, and there's video of it, and there's memories, and there's, you know, stories that you can tell back and forth with people who were also there. But it doesn't stick around. And that's the one thing that I don't think I ever really thought about, that stuff doesn't really matter. I shouldn't reduce it to that. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it's just not this, you know, omnipresent thing. Like when people say, oh, like this, whichever actress is Grammy winning or Oscar winning actress or actor, like, and they attach that tag to their name as if it's like branded on their forehead, you know, or they do that with Periphery too. Grammy nominated Periphery because we got nominated for a Grammy in 2015, I think. And nobody in the band thinks about it anymore, except, you know, people, when officially touting us, it's always a Grammy nominated Periphery. In our minds, it's like, it may as well not even happen because it was such a fluky thing that happened, 8 years ago at this point. But those things aren't really part of, your daily thinking past that first phase of euphoria and sort of hype and this like sort of high around it. And the thing that I've learned from that is the things that I held close to my heart before any of this stuff are even more important. And I've learned that those things are the real stuff of life, the real kind of main event of why I'm here. Like time with my friends, time with my siblings, time with my parents, time with my wife, time with my dog, time with any number of the hobbies and things that like going camping with my family, with my wife, to going on walks, traveling with people I care about, like the same stuff that I loved back before any of that, like I love even more now, because year after year, I'm becoming more aware of how much space that occupies in my heart, like how much more whole that makes me feel as time goes on, as opposed to the music stuff, which, don't get me wrong, the music is, whether I like it or not, part of my identity. It's like who I am. I'm a musician. I love guitar. I love music. I fucking love heavy metal. I love all of it. But at the same time, like that doesn't ever dictate who I am day to day, person to person, who I'm talking to and who I'm communicating with. Like that's not what I lead with. And at the end of the day, when I'm on my deathbed, I don't know, this is going to sound really lame, but I don't think those are the kinds of things that I'm going to be clinging to. When it's my time to go, I'm going to be thinking about the stuff that's really occupied. I keep saying most of that space, in my heart, and that's what I found out over the years.
What's your, bit of a sort of left field question, but what's your best like story?
As far as music?
Anything, and whatever you. It's funny because like when I asked that, I was thinking that would be an interesting question. I was listening to what you're saying for the record, but obviously in my head I'm thinking, what am I going to say next? And I sort of, whenever I ask a question, I'm thinking, what do I say to that? And whenever I think of what my best like stories are about my life, I always go to things like with friends and family.
Yeah.
Do you have any like, I don't know, good moment or just things that is like a good, I suppose, I don't want to say best memory, but like, yeah, story. Someone asked me this the other day. He was like, my friend Michael, he just said to me like, he's such a strange kind of guy. And the way he phrases things is really funny. Like strange in a good way. And we were walking, we gone on a night out and we were just walking around all hungover and like, just, trying to sort of like stay alive basically that morning. And he just went, tell me a story. I was like, what? And he just like...
What are you, 4 years old? What do you mean?
Yeah, but he meant like, just tell me something interesting you've done, basically. I was like, oh, that's quite a good question. Puts you on the spot. So I guess I'm passing the baton on to you there.
Yeah, I'll take it gladly. Oh, yeah. I got a lot of music stories.
Could be a music one.
But again, like the stuff that's, again, I feel like is more integral to who I am now is the non-music stuff. I'll tell you something that I don't tell a lot of people, that I've been to space. No, I'm just kidding. I've never been to space. I lived through a volcano eruption in the Philippines when I was 9 years old. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and me and my family were very happy in the Philippines. Like I loved living in the Philippines. We all did. A volcano erupted less than an hour from where we lived, and it was a massive, massive volcano, which you can Google. It's called Mount Pinatubo. It was a long dormant volcano, but one that they were predicting to erupt that summer. I think it was July or June when it erupted in 1991, but it blew the fuck up and we had to be evacuated. Our whole town did. And I never went back to the Philippines. I've been back for visits in years afterwards. But when we were evacuated, at least, in my 9-year-old brain, I was like, oh, we're just coming back, like the volcano erupt and then we'll just come back to the Philippines and we'll keep living here, going to the beach every other day. And and I didn't care about America or the States. I didn't give a shit about living in the States. I didn't care about being an American kid. My dad is American, but he never tried to ingrain in us like, you got to live in the States one day. I just wanted to live in the Philippines. I just wanted to be a Filipino kid my whole life, and just go to the beach and eat out of coconuts and and just have this classic lifestyle that I envisioned. But we never had it. And I always think to myself, it's like, what happens if we would have went back? Or what happens if that volcano never erupts? Like, do we just stay there? And do I never have a life here? Do I never, meet any of the people that I ended up meeting in my life that transformed who I am? Like, no, it's a never ending, like, what if scenario, to think about all the time. But yeah, that's a crazy one. I remember the day that it erupted, this huge black mushroom cloud, like basically swallowing the sky for like 2 days. And it just like raining down what I called snow, because I was 9 years old. It wasn't snow, it was just ash, and ash like up to our roof where we lived. It was really crazy. I think there were not very many casualties, maybe like 10, a dozen, but millions of dollars in property damage. And it was it changed the temperature on the planet for a couple of years. Like the eruption, it cooled the earth by a small amount for several years. So yeah, look it up if you want some time. Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, but it's a crazy thing to live through as a 9-year-old.
Yeah, I find all those what ifs terrifying. Like when you think about like, what if I didn't meet that person or move to that place, or like when I think about the producer that I met with my old band that we then produced our music with, that we then went on to get opportunities through. The way I met him was that I had like 3 singing lessons with a guy who sent me his details, and that the going to that producer and getting our music done through him, and then the experience of that completely changed the trajectory of where I think my music would have gone. And then the sort of opportunities we have from that, I'm like, would that have happened if I hadn't like gone to singing lessons for 3 lessons? It's maybe not quite as crazy as a volcanic eruption, but
it's wild. And the worst is when it's like the other way around, because you mentioned a scenario where things went right for you, but it's maddening when you start to question it the other way, where things went wrong and you question what if, and what if they went right? What if it turned into this amazing thing? It can be a scary question for sure.
I had a audition to play for a band that played Download Festival a few years ago. And there's always that bit of me that's like, and the band actually isn't really, it's not really operational anymore. So I guess, it's possibly good I didn't get involved, but there's always that like, what if, like what if that's a moment where I'm like, oh, that would have been cool. That would have been a cool moment, because they opened up the festival and I was there at the festival watching them, like, fuck, that would have been fun. But yeah, it sort of went, I think the band sort of went to shit after a while. So I don't know. But yeah, man, no, it's been cool to get your sort of your take on some stuff that hopefully, like you said, you can talk about 7 strings and all of that business as much as you like. So hopefully it's nice to give you an opportunity to chat about some stuff beyond that. Out of interest as well, one last really quick question. The tattoo on your arm, what's the kind of stuff on there? Because I've always seen it and I've loved the colours on it, and I'm at some point I'm tempted to get something, but I'm intrigued. Is it something like personal, or is it just something you like design of, or like?
So yeah, it's kind of hard to see through the camera here, but basically there's the painting by Hieronymus Bosch. He's one of my favorite painters, but he had this painting called Ascent of the Blessed, I think. Ascent of the Blessed. Let me look it up right now. Ascent of the Blessed. Yeah. That I loved. Look it up when you get a chance. But the painting is really awesome. Like, it's amazing. I look at it and I get goosebumps. It's of a couple angels like basically hoisting a dead body, you can assume, into a hole in the darkness. And out of this hole beams like rays of light, which I always assume was like heaven. And there's someone with their hand up waiting for them. And I always loved that as a kid. Like, it was so comforting. You know, I think anybody who's scared of death, I think all kids think about it when you learn about what death is and what death means. You become very afraid of it because you're like, oh shit, what if my parents die or my dog dies or whatever? That always helped me with providing comfort, is thinking about that painting. And there's something about it that always spoke to me, even as like as an adult. I always loved the meaning of that, the idea that the next phase of things is not just rotting in the ground somewhere, is this hopeful idea that things transform and there's love waiting for you on the other side. So yeah, that's that's not the painting like stroke for stroke or anything like that. It's just the artists, my old friend Kenny, who passed away, he did this tattoo for me, and it's it's something that is very important to me. Yeah.
I just always thought it looked really cool, and I was intrigued to ask what inspired it. So yeah, wicked, man. Cool. Well, yeah. We'll finish up then. If you wanna get, we need a question for the next guest to open the conversation, and then an artist that you want to spread the love to, you think deserves some love.
Okay. Well, I got to think of a question now. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you can start with an artist. People find that easier, I find.
Yeah. Okay. Just like, does it have to be like an up and coming artist? Like, I
guess one that you feel giving a plug to might do some good for, Well, it can be anyone. Or just a band you think people would enjoy listening to.
There is a band that we just toured with that they're like becoming pretty well known now, especially in the UK, probably. So there's a band called Loathe, who yeah. I didn't really know all that well up until like the pandemic, but I fell in love with their music, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, these guys are going to be something special, and they're going to blow the fuck up. They're going to be bigger than us. I'm going to be thrilled. And we toured with them, and they were the best guys, and I love them as people, and I'm in love with their music. I'm not sure if they qualify into your, like up and coming, or, like they're definitely on the radar now. People know about them. In fact, they're playing with us at Radar Fest. There's a plug, July 30th in Manchester. If you're watching or listening, they're nearby. So yeah, come to Manchester. But yeah, they're awesome. Let me see if I could think of another.
I saw Loathe 2 days ago.
What's that? Sorry,
I saw Loathe 2 days ago in.
Oh, how were they?
Amazing, man. I've had Faisal on the podcast before. Bumped into him, which was nice.
He's great.
Yeah, it was insane. And they were supporting Spirit Box, so it's like a good tour for them, hopefully as well. Like, not that they're not on the radar, but like to give them that bit extra. But like it's a good lineup to have. So yeah, and then,
there's another great band called Sungazer who everyone should check out.
Cool. Yeah. I feel like I know that name. But
yeah, it's the project of this dude on YouTube. His name is Adam Neely. He's like a certified genius. There's no musicians, and there's Adam Neely above the rest of the people. But he has a project called Sungazer. That's that's pretty otherworldly. I just saw them play with Pliny last month here in Austin. They were unreal. Yeah, so they're very good too.
Nice. So I need a question now for the next guest.
Okay.
Set the trajectory of the whole conversation.
Okay. Would you rather? Can it be a would you rather?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather never have pizza ever again? Or you have to use change, like coins, to pay for everything for the rest of your life. So
annoying.
And not counting like mortgage and rent and stuff like that. Like obviously, like you can't just, do that. But like I'm saying, go to the grocery store and you have to have change all the time. So never have pizza again, or use change for every like purchase that's not, your phone bill or, rent or anything like that. So there you go.
My friend and I had a really good one, which was, would you rather be constantly damp or constantly buzzing? Like as in literally vibrating.
Oh, wow. damp.
They're both
like,
so annoying. Just damp, just like a bit, just like, you know, not like unclean type, like sweaty, but just like,
I don't like that.
Just like, I don't know, just damp. You imagine like damp clothes, or your clothes are damp forever, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's awful. I don't know what I would choose there.
It's pretty terrible, yeah. Cool. Yeah. Is there anything you want to plug to finish up?
Basically, just what I mentioned. We'll be in Manchester for Radar Fest. I think we're playing the night of July 30th. Yeah, it's us that night. Sleep Token's playing, but they're playing 2 days before us. It's who else is on that bill? Loathe is playing right before us. The bill is stacked. Just go look it up. But yeah, and we'll be touring too. So no matter where you are, watching, listening, we're everywhere, and we have some tour dates coming up in November as well. So keep your eyes open.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.